So we are Thrive Consultancy. We're in partnership with the City of Phoenix here today. Thrive is a benefit corporation, and we work to uplift a more equitable and sustainable economy. We are a small but mighty team that's really passionate about creating access to sustainable and equitable business models. We are particularly interested in alternative values-based business models, such as cooperatives, which we're here to talk about today, which ingrain and hold accountable businesses' commitment to well-being of people and planet. So how do we turn our passion into action? Right now, we're doing a couple of things. We have an in-depth entrepreneurial and small business training program around cooperative food business, where our entrepreneurs work hard to learn about sustainable practices and develop sustainable business plans collaboratively, and then go on to pitch and share their businesses with the community. We also do our ecosystem development workshops, which we are doing here today. Today we are going to focus on financing cooperative businesses. And then another offering that we have is just cooperative business support or alternative business model support, such as benefit corporations. We work with entrepreneurs or businesses who want to empower their workplace with these alternative business models. Today we're here to learn from our guest about cooperative business financing. We'll learn about the cooperative business model from a financing perspective and learn about their particular elements of underwriting. We'll also close out by identifying our next steps for businesses and community members who are seeking support or access to cooperative business lending. So just to frame this, our group works on sustainable economies, and in order to focus or empower sustainable economies, we need these support mechanisms, such as training and research, financing, policies and regulation, and marketing, so that we can really empower these businesses so that they can exist, succeed, and lead in our local economies. So today, again, we're focusing on financing. I will, here in a minute, introduce my friend Samantha from Shared Capital Cooperative. She will give us an overview of cooperative business model, what makes it different from the lending perspective. We will have question and answers throughout. If you have any questions and you're on Zoom, please share them in the chat. We will make sure to put them on our queue for our guest. We will then go into our elements of underwriting, steps for continued engagement, and then an outlook on next events in the workshop series. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest, Samantha, who will come sit next to me here in a second. Samantha Bailey joined Shared Capital in 2019 to advance collective power through cooperative finance. As a lending team member or manager, she leads businesses development strategy and underwrites and structures cooperative loans with a focus on worker cooperatives. Samantha has worked in community development organizations for over 10 years and brings a racial justice lens to her work. Prior to Shared Capital, Samantha led strategic projects to advance racial equity in city government and impact investing. She holds an MBA and Master's in Public Policy and Finance and Local Economic Development from the University of Minnesota. Welcome, Samantha. Yeah, that would be great. Let me make sure it's on. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you all for having me. As Hannah mentioned, I work for Shared Capital Cooperative. We are a democratically owned fund that is based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we work exclusively with cooperatives. Though we're based in Minnesota, we are a national lender, so we work with co-ops all over the US. We have about 100 current borrowers and $21 million in assets. Something really unique about us is that we ourselves are a cooperative. So about 40% of invested capital comes directly from cooperatives who own and govern shared capital. So very different than a bank. We have a board of directors that really influences the direction of our fund and sets priorities and who we're investing in and how we are investing in them. And so members are engaged with shared capital in these three ways. As borrowers, like I mentioned, they can actually get access to financing from us. They also invest some of their money in shared capital, and they can govern our board by being on our board of directors or serving on committees. And so at this moment in time, we have 300 plus co-op members and growing. And so when I say co-op members, that's really just a cooperative, like say your natural foods cooperative, but that natural foods cooperative could have thousands of individuals. So it's not just three, this is really thousands of people that are involved in shared capital's governance. So specifically on the lending side of things, we make loans across a wide range of dollar amounts, and that's on purpose. Cooperatives have a wide variety of needs. So we are on the small end making $5,000 loans to startups up to $1 million for the larger cooperatives in the United States. And those loans can be for really any purpose. You know, we do help finance real estate, we help finance equipment, inventory, and even kind of working capital for just any expense that comes up for a cooperative. And we do also make housing loans for our housing cooperatives for them to purchase real estate and also make capital improvements to their existing housing. So Hannah mentioned a little bit of today's purpose. I'll just reiterate that I want to provide some introduction to the cooperative business model. Some of you in the room might know that co-ops can look like anything really. So I'm sure I won't cover everything, but please and ask questions throughout the presentation about the business model to better understand it. And then of course, I'll talk about how we underwrite cooperative businesses. And these pictures that you see throughout are actual co-ops that we have financed and current borrowers. So the cooperative principles underlie everything that we do, right? And how we think about who is a cooperative. And so these 7 principles, any cooperative that we finance is following these 7 principles and more that they may have uniquely incorporated into their model. But I'll just run through them quickly. Voluntary and open membership, meaning that anyone can be a member of the cooperative. There's no discriminatory aspects to membership. Democratic member control is that board that they have or some other structure that really governs the cooperative. Member economic participation is that the people who own the cooperative, the members, are really driving the governance of the cooperative, right? The people who benefit from the cooperative are the ones who are making decisions for the business collectively. Autonomy and independence, and we'll talk a lot more about this as it relates to financing, is huge. Cooperatives, for example, banks shouldn't have an undue influence in a cooperative, right? They should always be maintaining their autonomy and independence and really serving whoever their membership is. Co-ops, number 5, education, training, and information, constantly educating members about what it means to be a cooperative, bringing in different opportunities for their growth. And 6, cooperatives are linked to other cooperatives, cooperation amongst cooperatives. So if you're, say, a cafe, that you might want to get your beans from a coffee cooperative. So that sort of ecosystem building is always taking place in the cooperative movement. And then, of course, concern for community. Almost every cooperative that you encounter has some unique concern for the community, unique community purpose that their cooperative is meeting. And so kind of in short, a cooperative is owned by, controlled by, and provides benefit to its members, members plural, right? That's really the main distinction between a small business and a cooperative, is that there are multiple members, maybe hundreds or thousands of members at some times, that the business is taking into consideration at any given time. So balancing a lot of different interests and serving that community purpose. And depending on the type of cooperative that you are, you are a clearly defined class of patrons of the business. And so a consumer co-op example might be a natural foods co-op. A producer co-op could be like that coffee cooperative that I mentioned, where the people who produce the product are the members of the cooperative. Worker-owned cooperative, like a cafe, the people who work there are the owners of the business. Residences, in the case of housing cooperatives, where the people who inhabit that residence are the cooperative members. And then multi-stakeholder might have all four of these classes as different members in the cooperative. So there's really lots of different combinations and kind of iterations of a cooperative that we've seen, and they continue to evolve. So I'll just take a quick pause and see if people have questions at this time about maybe shared capital or, you know, what is a cooperative? Any questions? Okay. Great, I'll keep going through. And we'll have time at the end for questions as well. So diving into some of the principles of cooperative capital that are or the principles of cooperatives as they relate to capital that are really important to us at Shared Capital is that anytime a cooperative is seeking financing or any outside money, it should not impair or undermine the cooperative structure, meaning, and specifically controlled by its members, meaning that if you, like I said, that example of a bank, when you're seeking a loan from a bank, that bank should not have any control over the cooperative just because they financed the cooperative. And so we at Shared Capital take that very seriously. And, you know, we're never going to ask for a seat on the board, for example, of a cooperative. We make the loan and there's very clear, you know, structure and rules around that. And our role is defined as the lender, not a member of your cooperative. These are just some of the principles that I mentioned before that are super important to think about as it relates to capital. Again, maintaining the democracy in your cooperative. Anytime you're getting financing, are you maintaining democracy with that financing? And also that autonomy and independence, you know, make sure the investor does not want to influence your business because they are seeking to finance you. So this is kind of a dense slide, but I think an important one because it's showing all of the places that cooperatives can find capital. And a way to look at this is on this continuum of equity to debt. So at the top where it says grants and donations all the way to senior loans, those are different forms of money that you might be seeking. And on the equity end, that means you probably don't have to repay anybody. So if you get a grant, don't have to repay it. All the way to senior loans where you definitely have to repay that money. And then in between, there can be different variations on when you pay somebody back or if you have to pay somebody back. And then under the arrow, you'll see kind of the sources of those different types of capital. So members at the top, those cooperative members a cooperative member could provide you a loan. They might have access to capital and say, oh, here's $5,000 and we can establish some sort of a repayment schedule. Or they might just give you a donation and say, I believe in this cooperative and I want to give you this one-time donation that you don't have to repay. And then Shared Capital is a CDFI and a mission-based fund. We provide mostly subordinate loans and senior loans, but we do sometimes make investments in the preferred stock of cooperatives. And then you'll see other sources there, crowdfunding, folks are probably familiar with, foundations and public subsidy are kind of emerging as a source for cooperatives. And then of course, something unique like I mentioned the cooperation amongst cooperatives is other cooperatives providing loans or investing in preferred stock for cooperatives. And then of course, I know some people are interested in seller financing and conversions. When a seller sells their business to their workers, they could provide some kind of debt or equity investment in the cooperative to ensure that that sale is successful. And then of course, impact investors and foundations can also play in the lending space as well as government. So this is dense. I want to also give people a chance to digest and see if there's any specific questions about what this really means. Yeah. Yeah. So every cooperative has a way that they've defined membership, and typically there's a member share price associated with that. So that's like, I'll again use the natural foods example, $100 one-time member share that you purchase. That's what we're going to consider the common stock. So whatever cooperative it is, they have some kind of a one-time buy-in or maybe ongoing buy-in, but that's what you would see on their balance sheet as the common stock. Preferred stock, and common stock never is really repaid usually. Preferred stock is, a cooperative might issue a certain amount of preferred stock to say buy a building. So they want to raise $1 million, and my math is going to be off, but they'll issue a certain amount of shares at $100 and say they'll pay something on it maybe every year. We'll pay 2% every year if you guys give us the money now. If you buy this preferred stock now, we'll pay money over time to repay that. But we can't guarantee that we'll repay it because we don't know how the business is necessarily going to do. So it might be next year that we'll repay you, or it might be 10 years from now or 20 years from now. So preferred stock has some return associated with it, but you don't necessarily know when you're going to get it back. And then the subordinate loan is on that fixed debt repayment schedule. So regardless of whether the co-op does well next year, they're going to owe that investor back that money. And the distinction between subordinate and senior just means access to collateral. So if it's a senior loan, I have access to all of your business assets if you were to go under. If it's subordinate, you might not get repaid if the business goes under. So that was a lot. Did that answer your question? Great.
The online notes will be able to send these slides out.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. So the distinction maybe between a foundation and an impact investor is really foundation being an entity and an impact investor maybe being a person or a group of people that are more loosely affiliated who have an interest in co-op. So like in the Twin Cities, we have a grassroots group of people who make small loans to cooperatives up to like $5,000. So that sort of a thing. But there could also be millionaires out there who want to make an impact investment into your cooperative. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
So they're not really investing for equity.
Yes, typically.
Like a grant structure, I mean, you have it on that side.
Yeah, what we've typically seen in the co-op movement is more of a subordinate loan, preferred stock structure, but yes, not equity. So it will have some kind of a fixed repayment. Or if they're feeling generous, more of the preferred stock. Exactly. Yeah, the angel investor might be actually more on the, kind of grants and donations. It depends on, what they're looking for as far as repayment. I'd love to see more angel investors in the cooperative movement. Okay. So speaking to equity, kind of segueing off of that question, these are some of the different ways that the cooperative can raise equity. So shared capital almost exclusively makes debt investments. But typically in a project, you're going to need some sources of equity as well. And actually shared capital usually requires some sources of equity as part of a total project. And so the question is, where is a co-op going to find that equity? Obviously, it would be ideal if the members of a cooperative just had the capital and could provide them the kind of extra dollars, but we know that's not the case. And we actually at Shared Capital don't want that to always be the case, because we're looking to expand access to capital. And so we understand not all cooperatives have members that have access to wealth or extra money. So these are some of the other ways that cooperatives raise equity. So that member share common stock, to the previous question, they can raise memberships. So that $100, say that's your share price. If you get 1,000 people to become members at $100, you've raised quite a bit of money that way. And usually there's a vote associated with that membership, so they can vote on really important issues in the cooperative, but there's typically no dividends, no kind of extra repayment on top of that $100. You invested the $100 and you're not going to get kind of anything more from that. Or you could issue this preferred stock, which usually doesn't have voting rights, because then that would give those investors too much influence, but they will get some dividend associated with that. And then the member loans is, like I had mentioned, that individual members or organizational members could provide some subordinated debt to the cooperative. So these are all considered, from a shared capital perspective, sources of co-op equity that would be acceptable as part of a total project package.
I do have a question. So, how do you put this on too?
Sure.
For
You want me to put it up?
just anywhere. Do all of these apply to all types of cooperatives, or are these more like consumer cooperative? Which one of these, I guess my question, which one applies specifically to worker cooperatives?
All of them. Yeah. These tools to raise co-op equity can really be utilized in any type of cooperative.
What would, can you give an example of what preferred stock would look like in a worker cooperative?
So typically there's some type of fundraising goal that the cooperative's going after when they issue preferred stock. And so like I mentioned, maybe buying a building, you want to buy the cafe that your co-op operates out of. And so you have a goal, and then you kind of a fundraising goal, and kind of back into how much preferred stock you want to issue. And the board is typically making that decision. And so maybe there's and then you think about what is the repayment that we can reasonably offer on this. And so if it's a building, depending on how expensive that building is, it might be 20-year repayment. And the way we usually see it structured at Shared Capital is that the dividends get paid out long before the kind of initial investment is repaid. And so and also the initial investment might never get repaid. It's typically written in a very forgiving way, which makes it equity, even though, yeah, I think co-ops really try to be very flexible with their capital, and take on capital that is going to allow the co-op to flourish and not be under very stringent repayment requirements. Other questions? Awesome. So as far as our underwriting of various cooperatives, I know some of you have lending experience, some of you have maybe worked with a bank or are a banker yourself. So there's a set of criteria that banks look at that Shared Capital also looks at, right? We're going to be underwriting your financials. We're going to be financial projections. We're going to be underwriting your historical financials if you're an existing business. We're going to look at kind of your character as a set of cooperative owners. But then there's this whole other set of criteria kind of listed here that is more unique to cooperatives. So we do everything banks, we underwrite in the same way banks do, plus more. So I'll kind of focus on these areas that are more unique to cooperatives. But of course, if you have questions about kind of the traditional underwriting, I can answer those as well. So as it relates to member ownership, yes. Oh, definitely, yes. So underwriting, it's the process that we go through to assess a cooperative when they're coming in for financing. So you've entered the underwriting process with Shared Capital once you submit your application for a loan. And so these are the different areas that we assess in that underwriting process. And so I'll just give you the example. I'm a loan officer. We have 2 other loan officers on our team. We would have a section in our loan presentation to our loan credit committee on member ownership, where we'll be answering questions like this. So our credit committee can have a better sense of who is this cooperative, because it's really our job as loan officers to tell the story of different cooperatives. So who are the member owners? It's going to be different depending on the type of cooperative, but like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, housing, it's going to be the residents or the member owners. Worker-owned cooperatives is typically the workers in that cooperative who have opted into membership. And kind of so on and so forth, different. Whoever it is that the co-op is benefiting, that is the membership base. And so we want to understand how you become a member owner. Is it through that one-time investment of an example of $100? Are there additional responsibilities? Do you have to be on the board? Do you have to be on a committee? How are you involved in the decision-making? So this is a really important and unique area in the cooperative underwriting space, is like, who is this co-op for? We're not only concerned with the financials and the profit that you make, we're also concerned with who the people that this business and cooperative serves. So just to give an example of some co-ops that we have lent to and the member ownership and member organizing process. So the picture right here is a Ronan Cooperative Brewery in Montana. It's kind of in a more rural part of Montana. We provided a startup financing loan to them for some equipment and working capital. And they were about 2 years in the making before they opened their actual doors. And it was a really broad-based effort. They had the support of the city because they were kind of playing into the tourist industry. It's a rural area, but lots of people driving through on their way to ski or different excursions in Montana. And so the city was behind them all the way. We need this brewery. It's going to help our tourist industry here in Ronan. But it is a consumer cooperative, so of course they had to say, who are the drinkers here in town that are going to be here even when it's not the tourist season, because likely the tourists aren't going to be members of the cooperative. So they're really bringing together a lot of different people over that couple of years to make sure they had people in town that were going to be drinking, but also understand who's the market outside of our small town here in Ronan. Another example is Extra Extra Pizza. They're also a startup. It's a full service pizza restaurant in Buffalo, New York. We just made that loan last year, and they are still in the process of actually building out their space. But something unique about their organizing effort is that they came through a technical assistance academy, much like Thrive. And that really gave us a lot of assurance that they had the co-op skills necessary to be successful as a restaurant, which is a really difficult industry, especially in the middle of COVID to open a restaurant. But they're doing great. Bringing in some other examples with the preferred stock, they raised $30,000 from the community using the preferred stock model. People bought in at $1,000. And so that was a pretty small group of investors. I think 10 to 15 different people invested. But that $30,000 is going to help them buy equipment, and they don't have to repay it on kind of a fixed schedule. Shy Fresh is a food business in Chicago, Illinois. It is specifically formerly incarcerated workers who wanted to create a community asset through food. So they have a commercial kitchen and prepare food for nonprofits, after school programs. And so, they're generating revenue from that, but it's really a community purpose focus on Black communities in Chicago. They actually bought a building using our financing. but they didn't only use our financing. They also had the support of an impact investor who brought some money to the table to make it possible for them to purchase their building.
So you were saying earlier, your job is to tell the narrative, to tell the story of the co-op, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that in this space of like providing loans and whatnot, justice has more, is maybe more at the forefront, such as, you know, investing in businesses like that, which maybe a traditional loan officer would consider to be higher risk?
Mm-hmm.
How do you?
So how do I mitigate risks?
Yeah, how do you present that story
Mm-hmm.
in a way that it challenges the typical story, right? That it challenges the typical of this is a really risky group of people to invest in.
So I'll say that going back to shared capital's purpose, our whole purpose is to advance democratic businesses in the United States through cooperative specifically. And it's a little bit hard to say how I present it because the people who are a part of our membership and on our credit committee, they're all focused on elevating cooperative businesses that are owned by Black and brown people, formerly incarcerated people, low-income people. So
How do you think what you are doing is helping convince others?
sure, outside of, say, shared capital. Yeah, I mean, actually, that's part of the whole purpose of today's presentation is really getting our narrative out there, because I'll say, you know, historically, we've kind of been operating in our own lane, in our cooperative lane, the $5,000 to $1 million kind of for 30, well, no, at this point, 40 plus years has been serving cooperatives. Now we need a lot more capital, and cooperatives are growing. Some cooperatives have existed for 30 plus years and they need $10 million. Shared capital can't provide all that money. And so in the past, I'd say 5 years, we've been making more of an intentional effort to connect with other lenders, other equity investors to kind of grow the pool of capital for cooperatives. So as far as advancing the narrative, not common narrative of what a successful business can be, I think we're in that process. You know, using the example of Shy Fresh, obviously there are impact investors that are starting to get interested in cooperatives, and specifically cooperatives as a way to build community wealth in communities that have not had access to wealth because of structure. So it's growing. And I'm one small piece, like this presentation and the one-on-one meetings that I've had through Thrive is one part of that, but yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Yes, yeah, we do have cooperatives that we lend to who have pursued that path. And we consider them legitimate cooperatives and legitimate businesses, but you know, maybe they have a fiscal sponsor or have been also incorporated as a 501c3. It's for us, we're very broad about what a cooperative is for that precise purpose. Not every state has cooperative statute, first of all. So our broad criteria is that you're quote unquote operating on a cooperative basis. And what that means is really that you have evidence of some kind of a cooperative governance structure, and you've clearly defined the membership, but you don't have to be incorporated as a cooperative. You could be incorporated in any form, and we would consider you eligible for our financing. Great.
Just some clarification.
Yeah.
Mike is asking, we know that both residential and commercial real estate, hot commodity in Maricopa County.
Mm-hmm.
For those, specifically a cooperative looking to purchase a commercial property, do you see co-ops at a competitive disadvantage or advantages to traditional sources of capital? An addendum, if there are competing bids for a property, let's say, have there been any inclinations that sellers have a preference?
That's interesting. Well, let me just take a step back. I'd say in the past, 3 years that I've been at Shared Capital, I've received quite a few inquiries and applications for commercial property loans. And in order to be most helpful to cooperatives, what we try to do is work with them at the right time so they can have kind of a pre-approval, because it is difficult for us as a lender, right? Because ideally we'd have the property identified and we could, do all our due diligence, but we understand that things are moving really fast. And so we might underwrite a couple different locations, 5 different locations sometimes, just to give the co-op the flexibility to be able to go out there and say, no, I really have access to financing, and we are a competitive bidder. I don't know that I can really answer the question about whether or not there's a preference, but I think, you said, Mike, to the point about, is there a competitive disadvantage? I do think there could be a slight disadvantage, but I wouldn't see it as any different than another business who's, say, working with a bank, because we can provide that same kind of pre-approval and assurance that we have the money where we've set it aside for this cooperative. But then, of course, the disadvantages might come in at people bidding over the value, right? Like we're not going to be able to go over the value of the property, but that's where maybe equity comes in, because they've crowdfunded $200,000, so they can also provide that on top of our loan.
So it sounds like you're really doing the due diligence in that part to make sure that when a sale were to come up, the offer that you guys are providing is the same as anyone else's as far as,
Exactly.
it's real and it's been checked and underwritten. Okay.
I do just want to add to about that question, since Maricopa County was specifically alluded to. We in Arizona do not have cooperative financing options, which is why we are bringing our friends from Shared Capital here to really develop this ecosystem. So I would say at the current moment, this is why we're doing this workshop, actually at the current moment, you may have a disadvantage just because currently we don't really have local lenders that understand or offer cooperative lending. Currently, it requires that everybody in a cooperative personally guarantees, or one person personally guarantees on the loan. So I would say that if you're approaching a local financial institution, specifically in Arizona, that you would want to first talk to us here at Thrive or connect with Shared Capital after, so that we can work with you and whichever institution you're working with to really explore what this model looks like and the opportunities of it. So long story short, for Maricopa County, yes, I would say that currently it's probably at a disadvantage, but also that's an area of opportunity that we are looking to explore and break down that barrier.
And to add to that, Shared Capital has experience co-lending in various formats. So sometimes we might participate in a bank's loan, or they might participate in our loan, or we make 2 side-by-side loans if they kind of want to share the risk there. So we're very open to and interested in sharing risk with other lending institutions and other investors. So of course, governance is huge for us. How is democracy built into this business? It's always going to be something that we're assessing in our underwriting process. So have to understand who is on the board. We're always going to be asking for bios of who's on the board. We're also going to want to be talking to people on the board as part of our underwriting. Understand, are there investors or non-members on the board, like making sure that they don't have too much influence and that the majority of the board is made up of the members. And that there are clear established policies built into any governance documents. So if a member joins or exits, what does that process look like? Are they going to get repaid their share when they exit, or is it going to be retained by the co-op for a certain amount of time? And what are the roles and responsibilities of the broader membership versus just the board? There's some issues that a board is only going to be responsible for, but some that have to go for a vote to the whole membership. So these are the types of high-level questions that we're looking at as it relates to governance. And then our process is talking to more than one representative of a co-op. Obviously, we can't just talk to one person. We need to understand who's responsible for what, that kind of all areas of the business are taken care of by someone that's either a part of the cooperative or an outside consultant. And then, of course, we're going to read all of your governing documents and review minutes from board and membership meetings. And if possible, though we are a national lender, if possible, we would like to attend a board or membership meeting to get a sense of the cooperative. And that usually just confirms, maybe some of the phone calls or Zooms that we've had of, okay, these are the people playing these roles, and we feel confident that they'll be able to run the cooperative well going forward. And so management, that, not actually unique to cooperative underwriting. Banks obviously also look at management in their underwriting, but we are unique in the sense that we want to understand how this specific business is managed, but also, do you have kind of sector specific experience, and have you been a part of a co-op, or people on your in your organizing group been a part of a co-op, or understand kind of how to run a co-op more specifically, because it is unique from any kind of traditional small business. And so, of course, that can be looking at your management team, your board. We're going to look at your technical assistance providers like Thrive are really, really important for us, especially in a startup case. We want to make sure that there's somebody, you're working with a third party who can help guide you through the cooperative kind of incorporation process or cooperative organizing process. And that governance help might come from Thrive, but then you probably need to have a specific lawyer you're working with who understands how to set up co-op documents, and an accountant as well who can work with your finances in some of the unique ways that cooperatives can. And then going back to principle 6, cooperation amongst cooperatives. They don't just cooperate economically, but they also cooperate as far as learning from each other. So we love to see in the underwriting process that co-ops have, especially startups, have connected with existing co-ops like them. If it's another food business, that you've connected with another food business to learn about best practices and some of the challenges that they faced. Related is peer support, of course, and then the established best practices that you might learn from another co-op, but also from technical assistance resources that are available locally and nationally. So taking an example of a cooperative that we recently lent to, and a little bit about their management structure. So Slow Bloom Coffee Cooperative is out in Redlands, California. Really, really interesting story. You actually might have seen them written up in New York Times. During COVID, a local chain shut down in the midst of a union organizing process. I think there were somewhere between 3 and 6 different locations in the area. So lots of employees. They'd been around for 10 years, really well-respected artisan coffee shop. And when people started organizing, they said, sorry, we need to close due to COVID, which made absolutely no sense based on the way they were performing financially. They were doing really well during the pandemic. But the workers said, F it, we're gonna start our own cooperative, or our own coffee shop, and make it a cooperative and make it a union. So they are a union cooperative. And all of the people who are the founding members are former workers in that now defunct coffee shop. And we thought that was great because we know that they've been doing this work, some of them for 10 years. And then they also had the technical assistance of a union co-op group here in the US. Yeah. This is a question I get a lot. And to be frank, I'm still trying to understand. I think that they want to be part of the broader kind of worker movement as far as being unionized. So it seems something political in addition to, like, it does seem redundant maybe. It's like, oh, yeah, kind of, yeah, so essentially, but hopefully someone watches this someday and can give me a little bit more of an understanding. But yeah, being connected to broader worker movements for sure, and having transparency in the setting of wages, and that there's a certain schedule by which, you know, wages will be raised. So we reviewed their union contract as part of the underwriting and all of that.
Do they unionize and pay dues in addition to the economic participation?
In this particular case, I think so. Yeah, it usually is both. It is dues and some type of a member share, but the member share might be $50. You know, for us, we have no set formula for the type of member share that we're looking for. We just want it to be meaningful for the workers. And so if people are low income, $50 is really meaningful. And we're like, great, we trust that you set that in a way that is showing that members are invested in the cooperative. And so on the accounting side, we talked a lot. A good accountant is really important, regardless of if they have co-op experience. In this case, they couldn't find somebody with co-op specific experience. There's not many in the country. That's a plug to any accountants out there. If you know any accountants, to become trained in cooperative accounting, because there's a huge need right now. But Slow Bloom did find an accountant prior to us making the loan. That was one of the conditions. So, you know, absolutely have to find an accountant who can at least work with your financials, even if they're not co-op familiar. And then they did quite a bit of learning exchange with other cooperatives. And so that was another positive sign for us. And that all kind of contributed to us, that full picture, contributed to us believing that they had a solid management structure and the right experience as part of their founding team. So another unique area is member equity, and then, you know, kind of patronage. So we've talked a lot about member shares. We always want to understand how that value or price was determined. And as I just mentioned, the only rule we have around that is that it's a meaningful amount for the people who are members. And we also want to understand if people are going to be repaid when they exit the cooperative, and what schedule they're going to be paid on. Because what if 100 people exit and the co-op then owes them, you know, thousands of dollars? You want to make sure that in the governing documents it says that there's a specific runway, like within 5 years we'll repay you, just so the co-op can kind of manage their cash and not have to pay out people that are exiting all at the same time. Then we also, so on the patronage side of things, we want to understand how the surplus or profit of the cooperative is allocated between these three entities. So obviously the cooperative is the business. If there's some profit, we want to know that there's a percentage that's going to be allocated to the cooperative and its ongoing financial success. But then there's internal capital accounts, which don't want to get too in the weeds, but if someone wants to, we could. But at a high level, on the balance sheet, there's an internal capital account associated with each member. Usually this isn't a worker owner situation. So with each worker, where they can kind of keep the value, the wealth, I guess, that they're building and equity that they're building in that business. And then there's also patronage dividends, that is money that is paid out to members. So we just want to understand how any profit or loss is allocated between the co-op and then the worker owners. And these are really important pieces for us to share, that we do not assess these things. And especially back to the question about how are we bringing other lenders into the fold, I would want them to know that we at Shared Capital intentionally do not look at the financial standing of individual cooperative members, because we are assessing the cooperative as a whole, not the individual financial history and past of cooperative members, because we see that as a barrier if we were to be looking at, say, the credit score of an individual cooperative member. Why should the whole entity be punished for something that likely is due to a structural factor, or this it just doesn't mean anything about a person, right? That's not actually someone's character. that is kind of an arbitrary metric that has been used and I think really weaponized in a lot of ways. So we intentionally do not look at credit scores. And then the personal collateral of any individual cooperative member is not taken into account. So we like to have collateral for our loans, but it's going to be the cooperative's collateral. So for example, equipment. If you go under as a cooperative, I'm going to try to resell your equipment to recover my loan. But I'm not going to come after your house or your car. Those are your personal assets. That is not the cooperative's asset. If the co-op though owns a building or a car, that would be fair game for us to resell in a default situation.
So if the cooperative applies and they decide you're not yet ready, or do you take like a fee lab stance where you're like, we'll help you get to a place, these are what we recommend get to a place where you feel lending to you, or how does it work in terms of now?
Yeah. We very rarely actually say no. It usually is maybe later, and this is what we would need to see from you to be able to consider you in the future. And that's where, as a national lender, we're connected to organizations like Thrive all over the country. And so we're going to say, well, we have this partner, or we have 10 different partners, choose whichever one you want to, or maybe you know another person or organization that can help you, but we need you to find somebody that has this type of expertise to get you ready for a loan. Sometimes a loan though, specifically as the vehicle, doesn't make sense. And so we will say that sometimes, like, we would love to lend to you in the future, but we might suggest that you first crowdfund for this money, or look to a foundation or something like that. But yeah, we try to give as much feedback as possible if we're not going to move forward with the application at this particular moment. So moving into kind of how we structure the loan and some conditions that we might put on a loan to make sure that it is successful and kind of make our credit committee comfortable with the loan. So on the governance side, there are situations where we're going to require some type of technical assistance, specifically governance training. And then on an ongoing basis, we're going to want to maybe attend those meetings to make sure things are going well, or review minutes from those meetings to make sure also that they're happening, and kind of get a sense for what the issues are on an ongoing basis for the board. So there's always going to be some kind of a governance assessment in underwriting, and sometimes there will be a condition to make sure that governance is solid on an ongoing basis. And then with the equity, we want to make sure that investors aren't getting paid out too early, especially if shared capital has put a loan out there. We're probably going to say there needs to be a pause on any investor payments for repayments for at least the term of our loan. And our typical first term that we would do with a cooperative that we're just starting a relationship with would be a 5-year term. So for 5 years, you can't repay any investors. There's always a caveat there that you're doing really well financially, and actually you can. And so we'll write into the loan documents, the exception being if you come to your loan officer and you get written approval, then you can repay investors, but we'll need to review that before any investors are repaid. And then as far as growth, we want to understand how you're going to grow your membership base and raise additional equity over time, because you're likely going to need some flexible capital in the future. So if we're giving you a $10,000 loan for equipment now, great, but you're going to need maybe some other money, some more flexible money to continue to grow the business. And so we want to see that plan at the outset before we make the loan. And I think Hannah mentioned this, as it relates to collateral and guarantees, we very, very rarely use personal guarantees. So typically we're waiving personal guarantees. In the cases that we do make use of them, I can say there's like a few different buckets. If it's a startup that has very few members, so say you have only 3 members, which is the minimum that we need to consider you a cooperative, we want to see a plan for getting to 5 members or 10 members, or maybe it's 1,000, depending on the type of cooperative that you are. And so we might have a time limited guarantee. So we'll say, you know, until you get to this amount of membership, there is a partial guarantee, a partial personal guarantee on these individuals. And usually people comply, and we have those removed after, you know, whatever period of time it takes to grow their membership. Let's see. Yeah, and like it says there, we usually use partial personal guarantees to ensure commitment. It's not really for us to go after your personal assets. I don't think we've ever actually done that in the case that we did put a personal guarantee on any loan. So some unique issues and challenges that cooperatives face, and for any lenders or lender adjacent people in the room, I want to point these things out. You know, we don't want to pretend like cooperatives are the answer and there's no problems. I mean, there's problems just like any other small business, but some unique ones are concentrated leadership. You know, there's co-ops that say they're a co-op, but then we kind of dig into things and meet with them and review documents and come to understand that we really are only talking to a couple people and they seem to know more than anybody else. And so how invested are these other members in the cooperative? And so there's always options and opportunities for addressing that challenge of concentrated leadership. You know, of course, we've sometimes required internal leadership development as a condition of a loan. We have connections to many trainers, and so we can also offer a menu. You know, we have no requirement around who you use, but just that you choose somebody who's qualified to train you and your worker owners on how to share leadership and really educate each other. Because ideally in any cooperative, like that's a big benefit of a cooperative, that one person doesn't hold all the knowledge. So ideally you're constantly educating one another about accounting or operations, whatever it is. So we can support that effort by having that type of a condition on a loan. And then another unique challenge is how we compensate the founders in a way that is congruent with cooperative values. So like I mentioned before, we want to make sure that no one person has undue influence on the cooperative. There should be kind of a one member, one vote type of structure. But when it's very real that there's founders who have put quite a bit of money into a cooperative, quite a bit of their sweat into the cooperative, and that they do deserve some compensation. And so sometimes a cooperative might establish a founder member class to address this, or a special equity class, or give that person or those people a board seat for a set period of time, and then they're going to roll off the board. But they'll get maybe a little bit of a special voice for a certain amount of time, but they will only represent one vote on the board. So those are a couple of different ways that we've seen it dealt with, but we do know that this is an issue that deserves attention, and we're constantly grappling with how to make sure founders are compensated and the cooperative is still in accordance with cooperative values. So that concludes my formal presentation. I would love to take any questions, or we could have a conversation. Thank you all for having me. Yeah, definitely. Okay.
Maybe since we have people in the room who are playing with the idea of conversion, what might that look like in elements of our underwriting? What would you look for to lend to a business that is converting to a cooperative?
Great. So I should take a step back and say that we only work with cooperatives at Shared Capital, and under that umbrella, we work with startup cooperatives, new cooperatives. We work with existing co-ops that want to expand, and then this area Hannah is mentioning, which is the conversion to worker ownership. So an existing business as an exit strategy for the owner that they would like to sell to their employees to actually own the business together. So that's what I'm talking about when I say conversions. It's really an emerging area. So I'll say some of the process that we've seen, we've done, I think 17 conversions at Shared Capital in the past 4 or 5 years. And that number goes up every year. It's becoming more known as a strategy. We think that's amazing. So this is based on kind of those conversions that we've done. So early on, we're usually talking to the owner. The owner has got connected to us through a technical assistance provider like Thrive, or they saw it on the news or something and they reach out to us, and we talk to the owner about, why do you want to sell to your employees? Do you have thoughts on a sale price and structure? What are your needs as far as when you need the money? Do you need all of the value of the cooperative at closing, or could you wait 10 years? It's going to be really unique depending on who the owner is. That being said, when a project actually moves to underwriting, we're only concerned with the workers, really. I mean, we're loosely concerned with the owner as far as the sale price and the structure of their buyout, but we need to understand what's the business going to be on an ongoing basis. So that kind of creates a unique challenge, because we might have started talking to an owner and they tend to think they're responsible for the process, but actually the workers are. So usually we talk to them for a while and then we say, okay, it sounds like you're pretty serious about selling. So either get connected to a TA provider that can help you with that process, or we can give you some options of people you can connect with and work with them for a while. And then you're probably going to come back to us with more of a fleshed out idea of what the sale price is, and absolutely need a founding team of worker owners. And then that's who I want to be talking to, because I want to make sure that they can run the business when you leave. And so that pre-process of kind of talking to lenders, talking to technical assistance providers, talking to your employees, which is huge to gauge interest, because some owners think it's a great idea and then employees are like, I don't want to buy the business. That's cute, but nobody wants to do that. So that could take 6 months, that could take 2 years, that could take 5 years. I mean, it's really move very quickly and move very slowly. It just kind of depends on the owner and their unique situation. So there's this pre-process, kind of pre-development, I guess you might call it, and then typically come back to us when you have a sense of the sale price, or close to reaching a sale price, and you have a team of founding worker owners. And then, depending on how much technical assistance you've already had on like governance, financials, it could move pretty quickly once you come to us. It just depends on what's taken place before you come back to us with more of the numbers and the projections and the business plan. So then it kind of follows more of our regular process for underwriting. Yeah, also an emerging area. So mostly, we've mostly had small, lower sale prices in the past, but in I think this past year, we saw $1 million+ sale prices. In those cases, we want to see a third-party valuation. Prior to that, we hadn't really required it because, first of all, very few valuation professionals are familiar with cooperatives. And so they can't really price in the unique value that co-ops might provide. And I don't know if that's really something you even can do. It's kind of this intangible that usually workers would agree with the seller. And we kind of felt comfortable with the negotiation that took place between them. But as the sale prices creep up and we're lending more, we are looking for the third-party valuation. And we typically don't go any higher than that third-party valuation. And of course, most owners are like, this is way too low. The business is worth so much more than this, but it's kind of all we have to go off of. So we usually do. I think we'll probably require it for almost all conversions going forward. Yeah. Mhm, mhm. So policy specifically? Yeah. It would be amazing if city governments, county, federal, state, all provided some technical assistance dollars, grants, because lots of people come to us with great ideas and we want to finance them, but there might not be someone in their local community or context who can support them through that process. I mean, we provide some limited technical assistance, but as a national lender, we can't understand every context, and it's much better if there's somebody on the ground there with you, guiding you through that process. But those technical assistance providers need to be compensated. And if we're talking about low wealth, communities or group of people, I understand it's not reasonable to expect them to pay the full price, say, for a technical assistance provider. So if there were some public dollars available for that, that would be great. So I'd say that's maybe a policy ask that I have. And there are across the country, especially with COVID recovery dollars, are being allocated to technical assistance for cooperatives, technical assistance specifically. So it's happening and should happen everywhere. Let's see. As far as accessing more capital, like I was saying, we're seeing cooperatives that need millions of dollars or conversions that need millions of dollars that we can't provide at this time. That's where other lenders and other investors coming into the fold is important. And I think banking regulations are a huge barrier because banks can always fall back on that and say, well, if this loan isn't fully collateralized or collateralized at this percentage, then we can't make the loan, which is true to a certain extent. I mean, we're not regulated the same way. So if there were exceptions to the rule for cooperatives, or just if that could be more flexible, it would be very helpful to bring more dollars into lending. Let's see. And yeah, the personal guarantee specifically for CDFIs. CDFIs exist, community development financial institutions. We exist to advance a community development purpose. So I think it would be great if all CDFIs were not making use of personal guarantees, but they do. And I think that's a big problem. Yeah. Right. But there could be policy levers that would support CDFIs doing that, or not making use of personal guarantees.
So do you have the opportunity to opt out of that requirement, or there's such a process built into avoid?
You have the opportunity to CDFIs specifically, yeah. Banks, it's a different thing, but they could choose to. A lot of, when we've had the one-on-one conversations, because we have quite a few every year with different CDFIs about lending to cooperatives. They're like, what are these cooperatives? And we're kind of niche in the CDFI space. We usually come up against that barrier of like, but I don't understand how I would lend to a startup cooperative without a personal guarantee. And that's where really the mindset shift comes in, and educating yourself as an institution about worker ownership or collective ownership and the benefits of it. We have a small portfolio, I'll acknowledge that, 100 borrowers, but during COVID, we had 1 or 2 cooperatives close, and it was not due to COVID. It was just regular loss. And a lot of that was about the way that cooperatives take care of their members. And so in the case of a worker-owned cooperative, instead of laying people off, they maintained employment for everybody, but maybe paid everybody 3/4 of their salary to be creative. And that allowed them then, when business started picking up, they had the right people, they had maintained that institutional knowledge. Another business might have said, well, I have to, cut everybody, because it was really only one person making the decision, as opposed to creatively problem solving together. But yeah. I don't want to be too simplistic. I don't think it's just that. I think that's, for some, it is ignorance or not knowing. But it runs a little counter to everyone's favorite capitalism, right? I mean, it's cooperatives operate in capitalism, the system, but they're utilizing it in a different way. And that can be hard for other lenders and investors to wrap their head around, because some people jump right to, oh, that sounds like a nonprofit. It's like, no, there's profits to be had. It's just a different purpose that this business is serving, and a different process that they're utilizing to make decisions and get their business done, whatever that business is. So I don't think it's just ignorance. Sometimes it's like, that just doesn't compute for me. Even after I've educated myself, I don't understand how this can be a successful business. And that's where just seeing more examples of cooperatives, and there are cooperatives in the country. So I think case studies are important, and publishing financials as part of case studies are important, because it's actually not that complicated. It's really not that different from a traditional small business, save some of these like unique pieces that I pointed out.
You have a question in the chat, and this is from co-op that's starting here in Phoenix and has been working on that for a couple of years. So again, a little more specific, but I think very relevant. You might need to go back some slides for them. So the first question is for startup cooperatives. What are the most common sources of seed capital? This particular group has seen a catch-22. They need capital to grow, but they need, they're having issues with that, specifically crowdfunding. They have, let's see, get this exact question here. For example, we found our past crowdfunding campaign became a liability later in finding an insurance policy. So, and I'm not sure the context if this is talking about, we're done crowdfunding or we're continuing, and that's something these insurers don't want to see. So can you maybe talk about, again, startup capital, which this slide right here, Ian, is for you. And then, yeah, addressing that about crowdfunding, if you know anything about, insurance.
Yeah, I'll say I don't specifically know anything about insurance, though I probably underwrote 4 co-ops last year that used crowdfunding as part of their, initial capital stack. So apologies about that, but I'm gonna share my email address here at the end, and please connect with me, because I'm sure I can find somebody who knows something about crowdfunding and insurance, because as it relates to startups, we are seeing so many more co-ops raise quite a bit of money using crowdfunding. And I think we need to understand how that figures into issues of liability and insurance. So apologies, I can't answer that question. Did they think, if there weren't these issues with insurance, was crowdfunding, I guess I might put the question back to them, was crowdfunding a good way to raise capital, or is it not adequate?
It sounds like that was their only method of raising capital up until this point. Then they're constantly moving forward, right? So they went to get insurance, and then that was a big red flag saying, hey, we can't have that. And so how do you, I guess.
What would be an alternative to crowdfunding, or?
What would be a good alternative? How can startups, get that capital without crowdfunding, which again, this slide is really good for that, I feel like, to kind of explain.
Yeah. Though I will say, as far as, when we look at the side of grants and donations, or kind of money without strings attached, foundations and public subsidy, foundations, hard to get in the door or find a specific foundation that cares about whatever it is you're doing or the region that you're in. So I acknowledge that. Public subsidy is robust in some places and not in others. And that's why I think crowdfunding has been a source that I've seen a lot of startup co-ops utilize really successfully. And it plays well with cooperatives, because you should have a crowd of people that think whatever you're doing is awesome. So it tends to work. The other area, I guess, as far as an alternative with the member loans or grants, that works depending on the type of cooperative that you are, depending on, or who is a part of your cooperative. If they have some money to give to the cooperative or lend to the cooperative. But I will say, I don't see startups using that member category enough and thinking broadly about who your membership is, or maybe it's not a member specifically, but it's kind of a supporter of the cooperative in your community. That might be an alternative or an additional source for money. But yeah, with this crowdfunding insurance piece, like, thank you for bringing that to light.
Is that something you've come across in the new, so
I haven't.
do we know if it's an Arizona issue?
So it's, I guess it's a national gap that we're seeing is that co-ops don't have great access to D&O insurance, so liability insurance. But I think it's more so the case of how does crowdfunding impact, your capacity for technical assistance, because some of these, like the insurance agencies, don't like the crowdfunding because it's not a steady way to bring money in. But then they're also facing this issue of they can't sell membership or equity shares without having some of these technical assistance. So they're kind of just stuck in the middle. And Arizona is quite underdeveloped in our financial institution capacity for funding startup cooperatives or startups in general sometimes. So we look at this in our public, there's no public subsidies, and there's no foundations that are familiar with cooperatives. And crowdfunding is something that our technical assistant agencies are saying is not adequate for us to go ahead and make a policy with you. Then what are our other options?
Yeah, well, I will say, like, from our underwriting standpoint, I would really only ever want to see crowdfunding as like a one-time source of money. So hopefully that's not something that the insurance companies think they have to look at as a source of income on an ongoing basis. Because we would be questioning, well, you shouldn't have to crowdfund every year to get this cooperative to pencil out. But yeah, this is, something that I'm gonna have to go back and talk to our team about. Yeah.
I'd like to get in contact with you because there are some of these nuances that maybe we're just not talking to the right people or framing things in the right way.
A different insurance company. And I'll say with any cooperative, I know that our administrator struggles supporting the insurance companies and understanding the business. So it might not actually be a policy issue. It's like the individual agent that they're talking to, or it takes some time. Everything just takes a little more time.
And I think
always.
that these are really good conversations. I really appreciate if we don't have the answer, we'll do the research.
Yeah.
Because we're in this new space, right? We're in this space where we're trying to set the foundation and try to build out this ecosystem. And with the trying to build, we find a lot of gaps too, right? Things that we need to focus and lean into and understand. So definitely, if anybody in this room or on this Zoom or watching in the future knows of insurance agencies, business insurance agencies, we are happy to have conversations and happy to try to demystify what a cooperative is. There's a huge educational gap since all of this is so novel in the area that we need to spend time paying attention to and providing that education. So we are happy to get into conversations if we do identify some of these people to break down those barriers, and then network with our other organizations that support business development, such as Shared Capital, to try to make more clear and more accessible next steps.
Yep. Other questions?
Okay, so we have a couple more questions. How does Shared Capital Co-op help their loan recipients if major issues occur that might disrupt their operations or ability to pay back a loan for a certain time period? For example, COVID-19. But it was great to hear that your co-ops didn't really face a lot of difficulties with that. We are a more resilient business model because of a lot of these reasons. But if something were to happen and cause major disruptions, how would your group support, or what options would you provide?
Yeah, well, with the example of COVID-19, we offered forbearance, meaning a halt on payments for 3 months to any borrower that wanted to take advantage of it. Some didn't, a lot did, over half did, and I think that was really helpful for people. On an ongoing basis, for any individual cooperative that faces issues, always reach out to your loan officer early if you see something that could be an issue, because then we'll start to put together a presentation for our credit committee, updating them on your situation and asking for a halt to payments, a reduction of your monthly payment, complete restructure of the loan, depending on how things have changed for the business. And so, you know, we restructure a lot of our loans, and that's what leads to our ultimately repayment of loans. So that's how we help, is kind of a case-by-case restructure or renegotiation of terms.
I love that you guys do that, because you're a co-op too, and you understand the humanness and uniqueness of each group of people, right? That's really great. And then another question: does a potential worker owner cooperative need to wait until they are in business for a while before they contact all of you to access funding, or can they come to you early on and see what the options are?
Yeah, we do make startup loans to co-ops that have not yet, you know, opened their doors or started their business. Much more rarely though, if I'm being completely honest. You know, as a lender who typically only utilizes debt instruments, it's hard to make a loan to a business that doesn't exist yet. But the cases in which we have, there's been quite a bit of organizing that's taken place to prove the concept in some way. So if you're a cooperative that wants to access, a startup cooperative that wants to access financing, I would say talk to us regardless of what stage you're at, and we can give you a sense of what we would need to see to be able to finance you. Sometimes that might be, okay, you should do some pop-ups or to get a little bit of revenue going, or your membership drive. We want to see that you've hit 1,000 members. That'll make us feel more comfortable that this co-op will be successful. So there's some different tools and levers we can pull on to finance startup cooperatives. So I guess the answer is talk to us whenever, but it is good if you come having done some organizing of your membership and your business already.
Kind of a follow-up question, just to get an understanding of what cooperatives are looking like out there. So it sounds like you don't strictly consider legal incorporation when looking at lendees, but I'm just curious, how often do you serve, or like what percentage roughly of the people that you do serve are legally incorporated versus not?
As a cooperative? That's a great question, and actually something I could know, but I don't. What percentage? Yeah, I don't know the answer, but
yeah, it sounds like you just have an internal set of guidelines of like
yeah,
minimum 3 members and other things like that in place, as opposed to legal incorporation.
exactly. Yeah.
Any more questions here? Any more? No?
Great.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks. And on my contact info, there you go.
And I can send this in a follow-up email too. We will share tomorrow. I will share a PDF of the slides with everybody who came online and in person. These folks are super helpful. We're really, really grateful to know them and to be working on this ecosystem development. Hopefully we can get some people in Arizona, some financial loan officers in Arizona to start to engage in these conversations so that we can build more capacities. Shared Capital is very, very generous in that they are willing to help people within our state. But we also want to try to build capacities so that not everybody in a country has to rely on a smaller organization in Michigan, right? Okay, I'll just wrap up, yeah. So again, today, hopefully we had a digestible introduction to cooperative business financing. What makes the cooperative model different than traditional business models, and what are the particularities of what it means to underwrite or qualify for these loans. There's a lot of really great action items there. If you're entrepreneurs, hopefully we took notes on some things that we need to come to meetings with, what they're specifically looking for in our underwriting, such as how we're practicing democratic decision-making. A variety of voices need to come to the meeting, right? It's not just about our capacity to repay, it's about our capacity to be a successful cooperative business and operate in that way with this group. If you are a financial loan officer and you came to this, hopefully you learned from your perspective about how another institution supports and moves away from risk. All of these seem to be pretty stable loans so far. Even especially during COVID, that's really, really impressive that no cooperative businesses shut down because of COVID-19. We will circle back with Shared Capital in the next coming couple of months. They are working with our friends from our last workshop, Project Equity, on creating some courses for financial loan officer capacity development. So as soon as those become available, we will call our friends again and hopefully have another workshop like this where we can get to more of the specifics. Again, this is just an introduction to really examine where the ecosystem is and the opportunities. Some things from our end. We are finishing up our Sustainable Cooperative Food Business Training Program for spring. We have one of our participants in the room today. Hey, Cody. Okay. Some online too, I think. It's a really great cohort. If you want to come learn about cooperative businesses from cooperative entrepreneurs, we will have a big community event and showcase on April 28th. If you go to our website, then you can I'll tell you later this week when I put it on the website, and then you're all invited. It'll be really great. We will have another cohort open to anybody living in the city of Phoenix, June through August. We'll start recruiting for that in May. Again, please refer back to our website for that. In terms of these ecosystem development workshops, last time during our first workshop, we asked for feedback. What are the gaps? What do you guys want to learn about? Financing was our #1 answer. That's why we're all here today. But we will be working in the next month or so on a cooperative incorporation workshop where we can work with entrepreneurs and folks who support incorporation like the ACC, Small Business Association, and so forth on how do we actually incorporate, what do we need to bring to the table, and what does that look like. July, we'll be doing a workshop, July or August, a workshop on cooperatives and community building, cooperatives and how they build equity in communities specifically. As always, we offer these kind of development support trainings. If you want a one-on-one consultation or project, we are happy to help. I do ask that everybody in the room right now, please take the survey and just let us know. And online too, you should have the link. Please take this quick survey. Let us know what you learned. If you have any more questions or concerns, you can put them at the bottom of the survey, and we will connect you with Samantha if it's for Shared Capital, or we will try to do our best to answer that ourselves. But thank you all so much for coming. And I think that's it. All right.